Julian, Brendan, how are you feeling today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So, actually, this is the second time that we're doing a bit of a roundtable discussion, just for the listeners and viewers. Today, we'll be focusing on burnout, boundaries, and balance in the professional world. During the podcast, we usually merge our professional life with our personal one, so things can get a little bit intimate as well. And actually, it's a good reminder as well that this is a conversation. So even though I'm moderating this conversation, you can ask me questions as well, and I will chip in for sure. So right off the bat, what does burnout mean to you? Not from the psychological angle, but what do you understand by the term burnout?
From my point of view, I would say burnout is when you arrive at a stage where the stress levels are extremely high, that you cannot tolerate any more stress levels, I would say. Hopefully, I would never be in that position. Um, and you probably need to step away from it in order to protect your well-being, and I think even the company or the business that you're operating in, because you will have to probably two things that will happen. Either you will end up leaving because you cannot take it anymore, or you will stop your business or whatever you are doing, um, or else you will damage the company if you start if you keep everything to yourself and you do not speak up, or at least try to tackle it in a good way to get out of the situation. Because I think it's probably a lot of different situations combined in one um, situation that accumulates. Exactly, accumulates.
Speaking your language a little bit.
Exactly into a situation that probably you feel you cannot get out of.
For me, I think probably burnout feels like when you're in a maze and you have absolutely no idea how to get out of it, or you're at a junction and you've got all the cars and all the people coming at you, and you don't know how to cope with all of it. It's a sense of hopelessness. It's a sense of not being able to see anything through. It becomes very overwhelming. You feel like the world's crumbling on top of you, and you struggle to find the answers to many of the questions that are being posed to you. My person, you said, personal and professional, I think they're all intertwined. And burnout can very easily start in one aspect and end up influencing and affecting the other, and vice versa. And then it becomes all the same. And you actually don't know where the solution to that burnout actually is. And you start to, unfortunately, show the bad side of the burnout in areas that have got nothing to do with the cause, the root cause. So it can get pretty messy. I can't say that I've ever been in a stage where I've felt burnout, but I think there were stages in my life where I felt that things needed to change and had to stop because I couldn't find the necessary answers. And some of the burnout, if you want to label it that way, were emotional. That became overwhelming, and that influenced my rationing, so my thinking, my ability to perform at work. It had nothing to do with work, but it made work look really, really miserable, really bleak, and it made me think that everything that I was doing was not having any value. So it's not to get into the psychological side of things, but it is a psychological cause to all the other physical demonstrations of how we operate on a day-to-day basis, I would say.
Thank you for sharing that, and especially sharing some vulnerabilities as well. And um, you both took two different takes. You took more on the Brandon. You took more on the generic and perhaps the well-known connotation when it comes to burnout, and I appreciated your intimate and personal take on what it means. Um, what what do you do to create boundaries and prevent burnout from ever happening on the practical side of things. So not in the sense that to support you from a psychological point of view, perhaps, but more on the practical side of things, the day-to-day things or the weekly or the monthly things that you do to set those boundaries and that keep you in check.
First of all, I'd like to say that I've become a little bit more used to speaking about it. And I think that is one of the first things that people need to start to understand that is critical in order to help with any feelings or potential signs of a burnout. The reason why in the past I had that sense of burnout is because I didn't speak about it. So I kept everything inside, and it was like a volcano ready to erupt. And when it erupts in a horrible manner. Today, I have a support network. So we talk about practical things and how to create boundaries and everything. Boundaries are extremely important, but more than that, you have to make sure you have the right support network to be able to at least go to someone or somewhere to talk about these sensations. And Vistage has done that for me. It's given me a space where I can go and share what fog is in my head and why I can't see the end of it or I can't see beyond it. And that has helped me then put into place the necessary boundaries that are required for me to get a little bit more peace, a little bit more perspective, a little bit more direction of where I need to be going. Today, approaching 50. Now, I'm starting to be a little bit less apologetic in the boundaries that I need to set in my personal life, my professional life, my social life. There used to be a time when you used to have to try and catch up with everything, right? You have to be everywhere all the time. Today, priorities is the main thing that would determine how I set my boundaries, how much effort and energy I'm putting into it. And this is another thing that I think a lot of people need to think about is it's not about how much time you spend or how much time you segregate for yourself. It's the amount of effort and energy anything is requiring of you. And that's where burnout really kicks in, because you're finding that ultimately you don't have the energy to cope. Because time, in essence, is infinite. We've got all the time in the day. In the world, we've got 24 hours, which is another 24 hours. It's a rolling 24 hours. Yeah. Yes, we need to sleep. Why? Because our energy is finite. And if we don't have the energy to deal with what we have in front of us, then it's pretty likely that at some point we're going to crash. Not because we're weak, but because we need energy to deal with certain things. And the boundary of sleep, of rest, of shutting out the rest of the world so that you can think, you can breathe, you can listen to the voices in your head and then write them out or talk to somebody about it. That requires a lot of energy. That requires a lot of effort because it requires a lot of self-awareness. And thankfully, I have an outlet for that. Both my partner in life, I can have very open conversations with her about things that are in my head, but also on a professional side with my Vistage groups. I have the opportunity, the space to say, folks, I can't see how I'm going to solve this issue, or I have an idea. But it's not just about, burnout and overwhelm doesn't just come from problems. It comes from opportunities as well. All the choices that we have, those add pressure, responsibilities to the people, the business that depend on you, your family. Opportunities are great, but you need an ability to be able to process it in the right manner. And having that outlet is critical.
Brendan, how do you replenish your energy? Because we're speaking about energy. I know that we discussed this a lot of time during our Vistage sessions. I think we've touched upon this topic 3 or 4 times throughout these couple of years. So the debate between time and energy, how do you replenish your energy levels?
I would say taking time off is essential, because of course when you spend time away from the office or from professional life, you're of course the mind is refreshed. You think about things that you probably don't think of when you're busy and you're just going through your tasks. Um, Also, exercising will help because it replenishes a lot of mental energy. In fact, even when you're exercising, you start thinking about stuff that you never think of when you're even working or at home, um, because it has a positive effect mentally, which I want to work out more on it now, because I have a lot of things going on in my life at the moment, both professionally and personally, trying to juggle everything, and we tend to put exercising on one side for a moment because that's the probably the easiest thing, but it's ultimately very important, and spending time with the most valued people in your network as well. Um, Also, I'm very lucky to have a very supportive family, and both my wife and my parents support any crazy ideas that I have as well. Um, so for that, I am also grateful. I think uh, basically those are like the triple R's.
You made me think of something, Brendan, and all of us around this table are, let's say, solopreneurs, right? Because we all have our own small gig going forward. And that is where boundaries are become very, very blurry. To juggle between being sort of like your own boss and growing your business, marketing making it relevant and productizing and monetizing your business, it can be a bit challenging. And that's where I would say uh, the difficulty in setting boundaries come up, because usually when we're at the place of work we have a fixed contract, fixed working hours, we have fixed rules of engagement, so to speak. Perhaps different roles requires a little bit more of a flexible approach, but for the most part I would say is that being an employee is more fixed than being on your own and doing your own thing. At least that's my take. um, what So first of all, what is the difference that you experience between being or having been an employee whereas to having your own business? And perhaps a follow-up question to that would be, how do you make sure that these boundaries are still set?
Okay, I will start with the second question. Fortunately, the business venture that I'm involved in doesn't require a huge amount of energy to run it. The biggest chunk of energy is required when you're setting it up. Um, so that's a very good side of it, to be able to still focus on my main role, being an employee and part of a team. So I wouldn't say I find it super complicated to do it, because even marketing, it's quite,
Being taken care of.
yeah, this is quite being taken care of. But anyway, some emergencies crop up. I'm glad that my my full-time role allows for some flexibility if these emergencies arise, because every business running of a business has emergencies every now and then. So that is I managed to find a balance quite quite easily. Um, Going back on the other question, between the difference between being an employee and a business owner. Um, Basically, even though I'm an employee, I still see it as like running, being part of running the business. So I don't see it completely different. What the main difference is of course in being in an employee relationship, um, you cannot take all the decisions. So there are certain decisions that stop um, at my level, And being a business owner, of course, you can make and take all the decisions according to how the business is going. Um, Again, once we set up, there aren't a lot of major changes going on, but minor decisions are being taken on a weekly basis, I would say, um, like even operationally. But I would say that is from my side the main difference, because anyway, and maybe influence versus taking a decision is the biggest difference.
Okay. Julian, what do you think about this?
I tend to agree the large part of what Brandon said. Main difference is probably the mindset, because yes, I'm a solopreneur, but I'm also an employee of my own company.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see whether there is a difference or not.
Okay.
Because you're going to be an employee or at any point, even if you're working for yourself. Sometimes I joke I'm the employee of my partner, you know, and or now my child. So I think it's really the mindset on where and what adds most value to what you want to achieve.
Okay.
So struggling or trying to decide where you're going to put your effort into one activity or one strain or one particular component of a business, it's very similar to what you would do if you were a full-time fixed, let's say, employee. Yes, you have more rigid, I'd say, definitions of roles and responsibilities, and you have a job description, which is unfortunate because most people stick to the job description rather than the role and the responsibility within the general framework of the business. So I think it's more of a mindset thing. Brendan said the right thing. Even as an employee, if you have a founder, a business owner's mindset, you can actually do a lot more than what you would necessarily do if you strictly just have, this is my job. And this is an unfortunate situation that we are seeing as well. A lot of people may not want to take on the added burden, the pressure or the stress of having that type of mindset and going beyond what is expected of them from their job description. And it's not for everybody, but the focus needs to always be, where am I adding most value? With the amount of energy and effort that I can put in and the expectations of the return or the results, where is my effort going to deliver most or best? And this is where I would eventually decide on whether or not to focus on one aspect or the other, whether it's business or whether it's family time. There's a moment whereby you say, you know, we were talking about boundaries. Where do I switch off? Or where do I switch on? And that is where I need to deliver most value. If I'm seeing that my partner is struggling because our child is crying, and I'm struggling to write, I have a choice to make, which is going to add most value to the context within which I'm living in. If I persist in writing, probably my partner is going to get more frustrated, my child is going to get more frustrated, which in turn means I'm going to be able to focus less. Where do I focus? I go and help to try and resolve that aspect which is going to give the most of us most value. My daughter will calm down, my partner calms down, the house is a bit more quiet, and therefore I might be able to go and start my writing in. But it's not the output which is important, it's the outcome. And I think this is one of the most important things that I have learned. And I would say more recently in my life, it's that outcomes trump outputs. Outputs are the tangible things that you see at the end, but they're not the ones that necessarily give you the most value. And for me, if I'm not working towards an outcome, then I feel that I'm wasting my effort and my energy.
You made me think of two main things which are running themes at the moment in my life as well. The second one in particular. The first one, I'll share a bit of a short story. Yesterday I was at a client and I was doing a debriefing session for a tool that we run in organizations, the Clifton Strengths. And during this debriefing session, one valid and fair question was, okay, what this will measure and from which angle I should respond the questions. Should I respond the questions from a personal point of view, how I act out outside the place of work, or should I respond in a way that from the mindset of how I act at the place of work? And I've been asked this question on different occasions, not only for the Clifton Strengths, but in general. And I pondered a lot about our sense of self in our professional and personal life. And my go-to phrase up until recently was, in my personal case, I bring Daniel to the table. So whether I'm hosting this podcast, whether I'm at work, whether I'm giving a workshop, where I'm coaching, I bring myself, my values, my beliefs, my mindset, my methodology. So there is no distinct hat that I wear. But recently, I was also exposed to a sort of like the contrast of that sometimes wearing too many hats at one go might create a boundaryless environment. So even though I'm comfortable with wearing one main hat, which it's like an umbrella term for all the hats that I wear at one go, for the person on the receiving end, it might be a little bit more confusing. And in coaching, it might be that you are perhaps breaching trust, because in my position, I would be in the middle between coaching someone and the client. So, and there is when confidentiality comes in. So, but there's an element of trust. How safe does the coach feels with that? So, I guess my question to that, or my comment to that, is that sometimes we just need to be a little mindful about our identity and what we're putting into the table. And sometimes the professional and personal life are intersecting more than we think. To me, which the work-life balance kind of thing, I would say it's a myth. I think there needs to be a little bit more equilibrium, and sometimes they overlap one another, because ultimately we are the one. It's like having a to-do list at work, a to-do list for your hobby, a to-do list for your personal stuff. Ultimately, it's just one to-do list. These are all the tasks that you need to do. So, and it's actually, I did that for in the last 3 years. I just have one to-do list. These are the things that I need to do today. It's regardless of what it's about, my full-time job, endeavor, podcast, whatever it is. But then also recently, I'm reflecting on boundaries from the point of view that, am I confusing the person in front of me with what I'm saying? And I became a little bit more vocal in what I'm trying to achieve and what my role is in this particular situation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's I think it's a very fair reflection to make, because ultimately, if you're engaging in a contract, because ultimately whether you're striking up a friendship or you coaching a coachee, there is a contract. That contract might not be a written contract per se, but there is a social agreement between us that I need something and you're going to deliver the service or a product that I need. So it's all about understanding where you are going to add value to me and how I am going to take value away from our engagement. And that needs to be based on authenticity. So if Daniel's identity is authentic, is genuine, is flawed like everybody else, then that's the Daniel I want. I also want Daniel to tell me what he can deliver and what he cannot. That's what's going to build trust to me. I've been a coach for a few years myself. One of the first things I say is that this is what I can commit to. I'm never going to promise something that I cannot promise, but I can promise to commit. And if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. Then it means that this is not going to work. And that's a boundary. I think what a lot of people erroneously do is try to overpromise or try to be everything for everybody. That doesn't work. From a legacy point of view, from a longevity point of view, from a relationship point of view, that doesn't work. the true self will come out. And at some point, the parties involved are going to have to face and say, listen, this is not what I signed up for. And this is really the thing. You have to understand what you're signing up for and whether you're willing to commit, to put the energy and effort that's required to deliver on what is expected out of you. Because there are expectations wherever we go. In our family, there are expectations between myself and my partner that we are going to spend time together. There is an expectation. Sometimes we take it for granted. That's why we need to have conversations. It's part of that social contract that we are signing up for with everybody. And in Vistage, we make this very, very clear. We have expectations of everybody around the table. And if in one particular day you might not be up for it, what we expect is that you tell us, listen, guys, folks, I'm not up for it today. I'm going to come here and listen because I just need to sort things out. We are there to hold you accountable and say, okay, but what does that mean? Because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, the effort that you are putting in to attend is also giving you value. And this is where I constantly try to remind myself about the boundaries. If today I need to be here, then if somebody asks me to be somewhere else, I'm going to say no. Because I've committed to you guys to be here. It's a value proposition, and it has to come from your true self. Because at some point, if there's too much of a struggle, the word balance, that doesn't exist. There needs to be alignment. I'm not entirely sure alignment is the right word, but you and I need to be in agreement of at least where we want to get to. How we might differ, and this is where you and I will say, okay, why don't we try this? If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. If we're in agreement, we do that. But there has to be a sense of cohesion with that self. Because otherwise you're struggling against something which is contrary to who you are in your essence.
And I think that is where the sense of self comes in. We need to know what we want, what outcome we want to achieve, because if we don't know that, professionally and personally, we can't try for that and we can't communicate it.
Agreed. But it's okay to not know it.
100%.
And it's okay to say, listen, I don't know my true self and I'm exploring it.
And there's power in verbalizing it.
Of course there is.
And there's even more power in sharing it in a Vistage group, for example.
Absolutely. Because you build trust. One of the two things that we are cardinal in Vistage is trust and vulnerability. You have to come into the room saying, this is a trusted network. And you have to come in the room and say, listen, I'm going to be exposed to people being vulnerable, which means I'm also going to have to be vulnerable. Because we want to help.
What do you think, Brendan?
Yeah, I think when setting down boundaries and this sort, I think balance is still important, in my opinion.
What do you understand by balance? What balance means to you?
Balance, I think, between work, life in general, because, for example, I was in a situation as well where my partner wasn't feeling that we were spending enough quality time together. So you realize that probably I need to create a balance between work, between all the other tasks that we're doing, juggling everything. So we need to create this balance in order to set out the boundaries on how to spend the time and actually putting the effort on different things, because we're trying to juggle the personal life, professional life, all the other things that is going on. So, in my opinion, it's still important to create this balance on how to allocate this effort into everything that we're doing as well, in my opinion.
If I just jut in, the word balance irks me because
I saw you.
and it's just me and my, let's say, fixed way of looking at what balanced mean. Because to balance something out, things need to be in equilibrium, and it's never going to be the case. What we need to accept is that on certain occasions we're going to have more of one rather than of the other. Because I don't know, Brendan, if you've ever managed to be like this,
No,
please tell me, because I've never managed to be like that.
When I say balance, probably it's not just being 50-50. Balance, if, for example, you're being 90 and 10, you try to balance it out more evenly. Let's put it that way. It's not going to be 50-50 because
But
there
at
are
times there needs to be a 90-10, because that's what is required.
Yeah.
If your partner, if your wife, if a friend of mine, if you tell me, Julian, listen, I need some of your time because I'm going through a moment, that for me trumps
which is the balance.
everything. That shifts the balance. It shifts the fulcrum. It shifts where I'm going to put
Yes.
everything. And if you need 2 hours, you need 4 hours, you need 6 hours, I will clear the rest of my day because that's what you need.
Yes, understood. Maybe what I didn't mention is you cannot be 90-10 for a long period of time.
Yes.
That's maybe
I think
what it is.
might not be possible. And I'm thinking about, because actually I had this conversation yesterday during a coaching session, and the coach was feeling that he's putting too much effort into work because of the situation that he is in, and that he was not putting enough time, energy, effort on the other aspects of his life, his family and his hobbies. But until recently, a couple of months ago, he was putting a lot of effort into one of his hobbies in particular. And I drew it out for him. Not really to draw it, but I've painted a sort of like a picture for him. Say, listen, sometimes, and it has been my personal experience as well, sometimes you go in motions. Sometimes we're focusing on A and not focusing on B. Because when we focus on B, we're not focusing on A. And I think that is true. This is like multitasking. Multitasking is also a myth, in my opinion, because the brain doesn't. I mean, yes,
It cannot focus on multiple
you can't
things.
focus on two things at the same
It
time.
can
You're
do things, but it
100%.
can't focus.
Yes,
Exactly.
and there might be women are more able to do that than men. I think that is true. I think women can have the tendency to think more things at one go. I think we men are more logical thinkers in a way.
That's why they win all the arguments, Mela.
Maybe.
One step ahead.
It's just that the brain switches very, very fast from one task to another. And there was actually a couple of weeks ago, I saw that video on YouTube. It's a very short video on how accidents happen. Accidents happen because we think or we assume that we're excellent drivers, and the more we assume that we're excellent drivers, the more we take it for granted, and the more we take it that it's okay, I can text this, send this text. It's okay, I can reach for my bag near the, or in the back seat, for example. The more we assume that we can multitask just because our brain, ironically, has automated for us, because the brain is very good at automating. That's where accidents happen. And it happens, I think, not only in driving, but in our everyday life.
You get overconfident as well.
And I think
One thing, sorry, just to add on to what you're saying. Every time you are switching, there's this. It's called context switching. When you're multitasking, you are context switching. Now let's not focus on the trivial things, but let's talk on the things at work. When you're working on something important, and somebody comes in and says, "Can you do this for me?" and you have to context switch straight away, you're losing a huge amount of efficiency. You lose a amount of energy. Context switching is the thing that drains the brain most. That's why sometimes at the end of the day, you end up going home and you're saying, "My brain is fried, but I feel like I've accomplished nothing." Why? Because you spent your day going from one thing to another and not completing anything. So I'm glad you brought up that issue, because it is one of the biggest efficiency losses in humans and in organizations.
I do think that we're doing so great by doing things very fast at the same time. And that is when another concept comes up, the deep work. Have you ever heard about deep work? Okay. So the work in a nutshell is that you take a specific amount of time, usually it ranges from 2 to 4 hours, and you eliminate all distractions, and then you just focus on that one particular task. Usually it's one main task that you need to focus on, but you complete it. So it ranges.
Like without interruptions.
Yes, without interruption. So no matters what you're doing, what you set out to do. So no mobile phones, no distractions, whatever they might mean. And that is exactly what Julian is saying, is that completely remove it, because those mini fragments are what causes energy drainage and wastage of energy in the task that we're doing. And actually that's actually a boundary in itself. So for example, when we're having our Vistage session, we had this conversation. Should we respond to a text message? Should we respond to
You know my answer.
Yes, I know your answer. And you know mine as well, because I mean we're all busy, we're all busy, but we're here, we're spending a couple of hours together, 2-3 hours, focusing on a particular topic, focus on checking in on each other, focusing on sharing a struggle that we're going through. And
But the way I like to explain this, and for people to understand it, they have to be in a position where they're being asked to interrupt something that they value. Would you answer your phone on the podcast? No. So why would you answer it?
recording.
But why would you? So why would you answer during a Vistage session? So this is the way people then ultimately understand the value of things, because it is a value order.
Mm-hmm.
We do what values, we do what matters, and we all know that even if we are dead tired, or we feel that we have no more energy, or it's the last minute of the last hour or anything, we know that if it matters, we will get it done. Why? Because it is of value to us. You can say, I'm too tired to go and meet you for a beer, that's fine. But if somebody calls you in the middle of the night and says, I need help, you'll get up and go. Why? Because it matters. And that's the point. So if we want to decide, you mentioned to-do lists, and great, I'd say don't do to-do lists, do the list of things that you're not going to do, because those are not going to add value. You shift the way your brain focuses around your energy utility. But ultimately, if you're going to do these kind of things, you're going to do them because they are going to contribute to something which is going to help you sleep at night.
Mm-hmm. I think it boils down to prioritization, perhaps. So not prioritization. I'll correct myself. It's identifying what's critical for us and what's not critical for us, because some things can be delegated, some things can be scheduled, some things can be deleted for today. Yes. Because usually we have between 3 to 5 critical tasks that we really need to do today. Other stuff can wait in a way. So do we need to be everywhere in this particular moment? We can't. So at the moment we're sitting around this table, we have an hour and a half. Once it's over, we can go to the next thing. But for some reason, everyone finds it very, very difficult.
Yes, because they have a different value order. It's not valuable enough. And it's, some people get, I'm not going to say offended, but they're taken aback when I say, this is not important enough for you. If it's not important enough, then you're not the right fit.
Maybe the word not important enough instigates that you're not giving this enough importance, perhaps. You have another important. So let's say we're having this conversation, and let's say one of us answers a text. It means might mean that what we're doing here is important, but in that particular moment, priorities have changed.
So this is where I'm going to agree with you, but with a bit of a disclaimer, because I would like to know what happened before. In Vistage, what do we say? No phones, unless what?
Unless it's approved.
Unless we agree upon it beforehand, and that's the point. So we start the podcast and we say, you tell us no phones, because obviously it's disruptive. But then Brandon or I would say, listen, my child is sick and I'm I need to be on call because potentially I might actually have to leave. You agree, Brandon agrees, then that's part of our contract.
Yeah.
And what we do, if need be, we tell the audience that there might be an interruption at some point, but they're not going to see it because there's editing. So this is the point. And this is where the self, that sense of being authentic, these are the things that people appreciate. I don't mind it if you tell me I would probably need to answer my phone, but tell me. Don't assume that just because you're going to answer your phone, I am going to accept it because it's your right to answer your phone.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no, because you agreed to the terms that we set when we set the rules of engagement for Vistage. And for those listening in and watching us, Vistage is not a concentration camp, all right? It's not a prison. We are using these as examples.
Yes. Only in very rare instances where something random pops up. I mean, that would be something that
It's okay.
is an excusable thing.
100%. I mean, that's okay. And speaking about phones, I mean, we have all been in a situation where we are with a friend or with our partners or with a group of friends and we're having lunch, we're having dinner, we're eating something together or we're hanging out. And the phone rings, a message comes in. Sort of like personally, my go-to answer if we're sharing something, we can be in the middle of a very personal or intimate conversation or very a deep conversation altogether. Say, listen, send the text, do what you have to do, and then we'll resume. I'm not sure about you, Julian, but sometimes it happens during coaching as well, especially if you're coaching senior management or C-suite level. For some reason, it tends to happen the higher you go in the corporate ladder, sort of. Like the phone is always there, and a message comes in, or the clock vibrates, and there's the instant inclination to look at the watch or
I think it's
Yes, it does happen.
it does happen. So what I would say is that listen, answer what you need to answer, and then we'll continue our session.
it's like an autopilot
Exactly.
thing, though.
That's a boundary. And that is part of your responsibility as well. Because your responsibility not just to your client, but to yourself.
Yes, I will see it more to myself.
Yes, because you're adding value.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're constantly on your phone, it means that you don't respect me
that's-
being here.
Yep.
So absolutely, I would tell them, if you're going to have a phone call or a message, I'm going to stop.
Yes, that's right.
What I mean to say, continuing from that, is that we can do it even in our personal life. So in a formal session, there is like a specific set of rules of engagement. There's a contract, as Julia mentioned earlier on today. But we can do it with our partner. Say, listen, this might be an important text, not sure what you received. Answer the email, answer the message, and we'll continue our conversation. And I think, I suspect that the frequency will drop. As soon as we'll start doing that, and as soon as we start doing that boundary and owning that boundary, the frequency of our friend, partner, whoever we're speaking to, answering their phone, I think it will drop. I wouldn't say it's eliminated, but it will drop because we're not allowing it. It happens because we allow it.
Most of the time, I think it's not even urgent to reply.
Well,
It's
yes,
it's
for
like
sure.
how our brains are ingrained that once the phone rings, we need to answer it, because
Sometimes you need a time off.
How many-
Sometimes
Do let's say you spend 6 hours with this person, for example, and sometimes you need a time off. Listen, half an hour, and it happens never naturally. It's not something very, very, very rigid. It's okay. Sometimes we see people hanging out together and they're on their phones. It might be a cool off period. I mean, it's a transition between one argument to another, sort of.
There needs to be an acceptance of, for the lack of words right now, the rules of engagement. Like when we have dinner, I try to say that, listen, when we're having dinner, no phones. Especially now with a young child, I want to also try and provide less influence, since they're absorbing everything of how we engage with each other. If she sees that when we are together, we're constantly on our phone, what's going to happen is when we are together, she's going to want the phone as well. Because they mimic, we all mimic. And we know when we're around the table and you pick up your phone, the first thing I'm going to do is pick up my phone. So I
Exactly.
think we're making a lot more conscious efforts in trying to understand exactly if this doesn't add value to us, how is it adding value to somebody else? Or if this is going to add value to us, let's see if it can add value to somebody else. And it's about understanding. Listen, I need to have a conversation and I need your full attention. It's okay to say that. Can you give it to me now? No, I can give it to you in half an hour. Thank you. It's okay to say these things with our partners, at work, with our bosses. Because let's face it. It might be easy to manage the people who report to us, but when we're trying to manage the people that we report into, are we accepting everything that's coming our way because we feel responsible, we feel fear? It's okay to say, listen, boss person, this is not the right time. How urgent is it? How important is it? Because if I do this, I'm not going to do something else. Is that okay with you?
That's the biggest boundary that you
That's
can
the biggest
create.
boundary you can create. Or let's not call it a boundary. Let's call it good relationship guidelines. Because if you're asking me to refocus my attention from what I'm doing into something that you want me to do now, it means that what I'm currently doing has to stop. Or are you okay if I pass it on to Daniel? Because if that's the case, then okay. But these conversations, especially in a workplace environment where you are not the boss, I'll tell you something about being the boss as well. Because just because I am the boss of my own business doesn't mean there aren't other bosses of their own businesses who are setting the same types of boundaries or obstacles for me to be able to do my work properly. So no matter what, you are going to have to be comfortable in having the conversations that are going to allow you to focus your energy and effort on where it's going to add most value. And I think that is critical. Getting comfortable having the uncomfortable conversations, which is what we do at Vistage, is really gives clarity.
I think the undercurrent to that, and it has been one of the main reasons why I started this podcast, is that I don't think we do enough self-reflection. I don't think we do enough self-evaluations to see where we stand, what's our opinion, and we don't create channels through which we can share our thoughts, even from an internal dialogue point of view. We don't do it internally, let alone how we do it in a group. And yes, Vistage can be one outlet to that, because you're verbalizing your thoughts, your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, and you have other people to take care of you in that situation. Say, some people might soothe, some people might hold you accountable, some people might challenge you. Everyone plays a different role in that conversation, and everyone is important, equally important, because when we're vulnerable and when we're sharing our insecurities, we are in a tough position. So we really need to have that kind of support, and we can get it from multiple places. Depends on what we need. But I think the underlying current to that is always, how much are we reflecting on our practice, on whatever, as a parent, as a father, as a husband, whatever in our practice. How much are we reflecting on that? The usual go-to, we don't have enough time. Going back to the concept of time, and
Probably we'll put it aside rather
And that's
than
where
time.
if I had have a bullshit button, because you have all the time in the world. It's just we don't do it because it makes us feel uncomfortable, and our brain hates doing things that makes us feel uncomfortable because it's there to protect us.
And it's not easy to do it as well, like self-reflection and going deep into your own experiences and thoughts.
What makes it
Sometimes
difficult?
I think sometimes we try to put it aside, even if we have something difficult, probably as Julian is saying, trying to put yourself into an uncomfortable position, you say, or maybe you try to look at it from a positive perspective. If you're going through a difficult time, yeah, it will be over soon, kind of. You try to turn that thought or self-reflection thought into something a bit more positive, that it will you will go out of that situation.
Why?
I don't know the
Why
answer
do
to
you do
that.
it?
It's the fight or flight of
Yeah,
I
your
don't
brain.
know
No, I mean,
exactly.
it's the
but
easy way out because Okay, let me put a patch on it.
It happens though.
It does. It does.
I don't know why exactly.
Look, sometimes it's needed because you can't. I'm saying this intentionally because sometimes you just cannot deal with it right now.
Fair.
But as long as you know, you're going to go back to it and deal with it, not permanently, permanently put it off. Unfortunately, what happens is where you deal with it when it becomes a crisis. That's crisis response, which is not necessarily self-reflection that you are saying. Also, you mentioned something earlier on about women being able to multitask more than men. I think women can also do much better self-reflection than men because of certain stereotypes that there are about men and self-reflection and vulnerability even more. This old adage of men have to be strong, men have to have the answers, men have to be the hunter-gatherer and provide and that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, that is still quite prevalent. It's changing, no doubt, but it's potentially, because obviously I don't know, one of the reasons why self-reflection is actually hard, because there's the risk of people perceiving us as weak or uncertain because we're doing a self-reflection. Self-reflection is not the same as not knowing the answer. On the contrary, it's actually a great sign of strength of you wanting to find and get to the right answer. There are various ways of doing self-reflection. Vistage is one, yes, but there has to be a lot of work done before. I mean, you journal. That's a format of self-reflection because you're putting yourself, your thoughts on a piece of paper for you to confront. There are many ways to self-reflect. You can meditate. You can go on retreats. You can. There's a.
For me, it's well, I tend to think that I do quite a bit of self-reflection, and so I struggle with understanding why it is difficult. That's why I ask.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it.
I understand why it is difficult, but for me it has always been. So the way I frame it is that it's more difficult for an ironic reason, for what reason that I can't fathom, is that sometimes we find it more difficult to trust ourselves than to trust others. So we find it easier to trust others than ourselves. What I mean by this is that why aren't we the one asking ourselves the right question? Am I running away from this? If I am, why? We can have that internal conversation or self-talk. And for me, that has been the easiest way of self-reflection, is that, and don't get me wrong, I do have external individuals who keep me accountable or ask me questions, but that's how I do it with myself. I ask myself, okay, apart from the kind of, okay, what did I do right? What can I improve? Those are sort of like the go-to and that they work. But personally, something that I do is I ask myself the right question. What am I afraid of? What is making me uncomfortable? How do I feel about this? Why am I running away from the situation? Why am I procrastinating it? But for some reason, people find it difficult to answer that question in an honest way. Why? It's a conversation between you and you.
People find it difficult to ask that question in the first place, and that's because of your primitive saboteurs. You know, they're there to tell you, listen, don't go. Why do you want to put yourself through that? You're going to have to face the ghosts or demons, the skeletons in your closet. It makes you feel uncomfortable. It's that fight or flight. Leave it there. It'll go away. It's not important. Your need to be in control, and that's something, when you're asking these questions, you start to lose a bit of control because you don't know where it's going to lead you. These are all things that your brain does, ironically as well, to protect you. And really and truly, it's setting you up for failure. So we have to be courageous or bold enough or true to ourselves enough and look ourselves in the mirror and say, I can do better. And just asking those small questions, not the deep dive, what's the meaning of life questions, but even starting from, right, how could I have handled that situation better? Right? Those are not necessarily life-changing. Those are not going to change the way people see you on TikTok or whatever it is. It's a question that you ask yourself because you know you could have done better. And it's incremental. One small change, one small question every day leads to massive change. The compound effect.
I think we reflect on a lot of different tasks every day. So I think we can find people have different ways on how to reflect. I think even on these small tasks that we do every day, how can I do it better? What mistakes did I do, even in engagements and tasks with people, with management? So I think we self-reflect without even knowing, because of course our mind is always.
But that's the point. You have to make it conscious for it to actually bring about change.
To ask the right questions, probably as
Exactly,
well.
to make them real. Because otherwise, as Daniel said, they become an automated process that we're not actually taking
the best out of.
exactly, yes.
Related to that, I was thinking that I noticed that in adulthood, we take it for granted how much time we need to learn. Where I'm going with this is that when we were children, there was also like the assumption that because we're young, below the age of 15, let's say, just to put a number, it will take long because we're inexperienced in life. But now that we're adults, we assume that we can learn things faster, which is not true. It takes much longer, or it takes just the same. So if we are learning how to ride a bike now, most probably it might take a little bit longer because we're more worried about what might happen because of the prefrontal cortex and all of that fancy stuff. But also our motor skills, it depends on the age. So there are, but even in soft skills, so let's say leadership, for example, we assume that because we're technical in this particular thing, leadership comes to us automatic. And there's the usual kind of being born or becoming a leader, there's that usual debate. But we assume that because we're technical or we've been in this place of work for a long time, we assume that we're a good leader, which might not be true because we haven't been developing our leadership skills necessarily. We might have been developing our technical skills. So that's why we need other avenues that can help us learn the leadership aspect of things. So, and that is also part of self-reflection to me, because you know where your strengths are and what you need, the areas of improvement for you. I think it's good to know. It's like having a car. You know, service is coming up, or I know that I have a patch of rust under the windscreen. You know where the potholes are. Same thing goes in ourselves, in our heads, in our bodies. We know where our things are. Should I sand it off and repaint that patch of rust, or should I leave it there and it will grow? And the way I see self-reflection is that maintenance of our minds and bodies. In case of exercise, you mentioned exercise, Brendan, earlier on. To me, that's maintenance. How are we maintaining our physical self, let's say. Not sure about your take on it. Might be a little bit philosophical, perhaps.
You move into the space of leadership, and first of all, I hope you agree that leaders can be nurtured, because otherwise you and I wouldn't have a job.
For sure, 100%.
But there's also an element of, talking about the self-reflection. I think leadership needs to be conscientious of the impact they have, and conscientious of the skill sets and this kind of stuff. But there's also an element of humility. You said that because you are a good technical person doesn't mean you're a good leader, because you're not working on your leadership skills. But recently, I watched very topically the movie Two Popes, and there's a quote during the movie that says, "A good leader is someone who doesn't want or see themselves as a leader." That kind of struck me, because you can be developing leadership skills and sharing leadership lessons by being a good technical person, individual. The difference is potentially how conscious are we of those innate skill sets that we have in order to leverage them for more common benefit. I think that's the point that we need to make as leaders in our own right. We're all leaders. You don't have to have, leadership is not a label where you say like, I am a leader. It's that ability to transmit confidence, transmit trust, transmit certainty, transmit a sense of self-worth through what we do, not necessarily by having the corner office or having the title of CEO or founder or business owner, because ultimately that's what people are looking for. We started off by talking about setting boundaries. We spoke about as well the relationship between different levels in an organization. I think if there is trust, if there's belief that people are respected, to a certain extent, you don't even need to set boundaries because they happen organically, they happen automatically because of the type of relationship that you have with the people who are working around you and at home. I mean, it's hard not to say that everything is fine at home and at work. We do argue, of course, and sometimes certain arguments are bigger than others. More often than not, it's around a misunderstanding or a miscommunication about our intent, the reason why we're doing something. Or maybe I would have stepped on her toes or on his toes where I thought I was helping and I really wasn't, because we take things for granted. So we need to build relationships that are built on enough trust whereby you say, listen, you stepped on my toe there. Just help me understand why. Rather than, hey, you stepped on my toe,
Don't do it again.
Don't do it again.
Or else.
Or else. And these are leadership skills that, yes, they can be nurtured, but to bring them out a little bit more consciously. Because I do believe that everybody has leadership skills. Whether we use them or not, in what context, that's different.
There are a lot of different styles as well on how you want to lead a team or a company. In fact, that's why the cultures are different.
Absolutely.
Just use a bit of a more modern word, perhaps. I mean, we can all be influential.
Yes.
And if you're influential, you're leading.
Look, as much as I do not get it, this influencer trend and stuff, yes, it can be interpreted. They are leading movements. They are leading communities. They are leading trends. They are leaders in their own right. Do I agree with it? Do I subscribe to it? Do I want to be that type of influencer leader? That's to each and their own to decide.
But it has become very accessible.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Most people, let's say, or many of us would pursue. It's something that we would like to pursue, that to be, because it has become very, very accessible to influence other by just uploading a video or commenting on someone else's video. You are trying to influence or share your perception on things, even if it might be hurtful.
And it looks real as well. It's not only accessible. Apart from being accessible, it looks very real because they're showing their life or whatever they're trying to influence. So they make it like you can be that person as well. So they make it easy, not only from an accessible point of view.
Not only the people who are uploading that content, the people who are commenting, because there's a whole wave of that. There are a lot of people who say hurtful stuff in the comment section. They are trying to influence because they have their own agenda as well. So you can be seen or unseen, but you can still be influential.
Yes, absolutely. I think what matters the most to me is that, as much as possible, and we're never going to get it right, is not to cause harm. if there are people who are influencing by causing harm, that is something I disagree with outrightly. But not because people interpret the message differently, because they intentionally want to cause harm. That's different, right? We all know that no matter what we say, somebody can interpret in a way where they disagree or they get potentially offended as well, or feel hurt. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the intentional influence to harm, to cause damage. That is something that I do not subscribe to, and I definitely don't want to be that type of an influencer or a leader. Let's put it this way. I think if we're doing it for the right reasons, to add value, to bring positive change, to help people create boundaries so they can live better lives, have better relationships, work better, create better futures for themselves, for their children, then it's a matter of ironing out the differences. And that's healthy. Conflict works. It matters in a workplace environment, even in a relationship. If you're not having conflict, there might be something wrong. And again, by conflict, I don't mean you're constantly putting boxing gloves on and you're going for 12 rounds in a ring.
Yeah.
By conflict, it means challenging ways of thinking, because we care. It's a sign of care. People who say, like, you're too emotional. I care. Yes, I can get emotional. Sometimes it's good to show your emotion. On others, no. You need to be a bit more level-headed. To use Brandon's words, you need a bit of balance of both. Okay, you need a little bit of salt and pepper.
He's still not subscribing to the idea of balance.
Balance of 50-50 now.
No, no, but very true. And I mean, we tend to cling on to buzzwords or words that are going around. And there are not a good number of buzzwords that have been going around. You are being toxic that, and or it's affecting my well-being or wellness. These are all things that we say in order to protect ourselves, and it feels like that it is our right or our entitlement to be handed that wellness, that well-being, even at work as well. And sometimes that is not the case. Something that we discussed, for Julian and I for sure, but I'm not sure in Vistage whether we discussed this, is that what we're bringing to the table and what we are contributing to the dynamic.
Constantly talking about
directly, I meant.
No, yes, we have.
What we are actually contributing to the group, to the relationship, to the connection that we have. And I think it goes back to the boundaries, and it goes back to the self-reflection part, is that do we know what we're contributing? Are we aware how we might be affecting people? Are we asking, listen, I said that, are you okay with me? Or we get feedback from one another. We genuinely give feedback to others based on our subjective view, because when we give feedback, in most cases, it's very subjective. And that's why we need to be very, very careful about how we give feedback, because, hey, in my opinion, I don't like this table, for example.
Careful, yes, but not apologetic.
Yes.
I don't think we need to be apologetic, because if we feel you have to be apologetic, then there's a trust issue.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm telling you. I'm telling you though. No. Sorry. No, it's fine.
From your point of view.
Yes.
It's important because
Yes.
most of the time you don't see the point of view of other people. So that's actually very important. You don't need to apologize for that.
No.
Yeah. And there is a particular way how you can be apologetic, but in a constructive way. I'll give you an example. It happened to me this week. So on Monday, I had a meeting, and someone showed me a video that they did for a nomination submission. Okay. So they are submitting their candidacy for a role, and they showed me the video that they took, and it was in a room. The person just went, "Oh, look at this," and give me feedback. And I was aware that I was giving feedback in front of a sort of like a room. Not everyone was paying attention to this person or to our conversation, but were other people in close proximity. And I didn't like the fact that this person was reading, and you could tell that the person was reading from a script and while speaking to the camera. And I told him, listen, I don't think this will look good for your candidacy. I would retake it. Have you tried a teleprompter? Have you tried that? And I gave my 2 cents on that based on what I've learned about this. I wasn't, and I'm coming to the part of the apologetic part. And so listen, I feel a little bit uncomfortable sharing this with you in front of a crowd. Uh, are you okay with that? So sort of like I said sorry without saying sorry. So listen, I'm aware that we're speaking in front of a crowd, and sort of I feel bad about having to tell you this in front of a crowd because I felt that I was a little bit direct. So I was apologetic without saying the word sorry in a way because the person asked me feedback. So they say, he, he just turned the laptop and showed me the video, so no other option.
I don't think you need to apologize if he asks for your opinion.
that's what
Let's
I
put
felt
it
as
that way.
But I wanted to share my awareness that, hey, I know that I'm giving you feedback in front of a crowd, something that might upset you.
And this is the conscientiousness I was talking about. That's the whole concept of conscientious leadership is something that's been mulling in my head for quite a while. Because I don't think we are conscientious enough about the impact of what we do. And the simple things, driving, we were speaking about it, we both ride motorcycles. How much more conscientious are you than when you would drive a car? Yeah, because you understand the impact, you understand the potential risk. And we don't have to be on a motorcycle to bring conscientiousness to our everyday. Recently, I've become a parent. I've become a lot more conscientious about certain things. Why did I have to wait until I had a child? Because situations put us in those in these contexts where they become required. So going back to the primitive brain, the hunter-gatherer skills are always there. They're dormant because we're no longer in threat, but threat is relative. For some, standing in front of a huge crowd is a threat. So defense mechanisms come up, the way the brain works. Driving, threat mechanisms. Our brain has this immense capacity to absorb information, like we were saying earlier on, but then to bring out the necessary skill sets because it wants to help us survive. And adding the concept of conscientiousness in my mind helps us tap into those resources that are there, but we don't really know that are there. So the whole thing of challenging yourself and putting yourself out there, yes, it requires effort, but it requires effort because you're drawing out all those new skill sets that you didn't necessarily know you had in you. Long-winded way of getting to where I wanted to get to. I'm sorry, but
That's okay.
I was processing it as I was talking.
I think that's the beauty of it as well because this is a reflective exercise as well. It is quite an introspective exercise because we're sharing ideas or we're sharing concepts that might be just in our heads or something that we connect the dots based on what we're discussing as well. So that's actually one of the most things that I enjoy when I'm shooting these episodes because when you're behind the mic and when you're behind the camera, the dynamic changes. And because you sort of slightly feel on the spot, you're more careful about what you say, you're thinking more, you become more conscious of what you're saying and the potential impact that it might have. And that in itself, it's like for me, it's a form of a reflective exercise because you're putting yourself in a different situation to the one that you're used to. How are you feeling about this, Brendan? Because I know that this was your first time experience about it.
Well, going out of our comfort zone is always good to challenge ourselves. So I'm still up for it. But yes, I've never been in this kind of setup before. But so far so good, I would say. You start to let loose a bit as time goes by. It starts a bit more anxious or hectic, but then you get used to the environment as well. So it's good at the end of the day.
I'm going to ask you a bit of a might be a little bit of a challenging question. During the conversation, because I noticed that you have been a little bit more silent than us, Julian and I have been a little bit more vocal. During the conversation, on any topic that we discussed, was there something that you would wanted to share but held back?
And why?
No, not really. No. We're just discussing all different kinds of topics. I'll give my take on all the different discussions that we have. Maybe it's my take is a bit more generic because I'm not that involved in these like deep psychological aspects or deep discussions about certain topics. But no, I wouldn't say I'm holding back about the discussion.
When it comes to working with others and setting the boundaries with people who are our peers, our colleagues, what would be our go-to strategy? I mean, some people might tend to be very open, but then retract at a point in time. Some people are more conservative. They open up at a slower pace. And again, this is about boundaries. Boundaries are ways and means of how we are protecting ourselves. How we make sure that we are honoring our sense of self by protecting ourselves, but still offering a space, slightly opening the door for others to come in, met people. How we strike that balance?
I think a good open relationship with both the team and even from a communication point of view, it always needs to be quite open as well in order to understand better your team, be available for them as well. And yes, we mentioned about creating boundaries, about, for example, creating this deep work strategy as well. Once we tried it, we didn't follow it up that much, probably because in our line of industry, this is actually very important, I think. But we struggle to keep up with it, for example, because we are split between a whole number of clients, and of course our team requires different attention, and we have clients as well coming up at random times. Of course our team as well needs attention on different tasks. So I think this slots of being able maybe to do this deep work, I think will help create, because that is a boundary in itself. I don't know, create a slot of 1 hour or 2 hour where we can focus as well. We tried it, maybe we didn't push it that hard to make it work. I think it has a lot of potential actually, because as we were saying, probably the biggest energy consumption is from shifting from one task to another, and also then you need to go back into that task. You would say, when did I leave that task? Was I in the middle of an email, or so I think that boundary in itself will be very helpful, I think, in creating this kind of culture, which is a boundary in itself, I would say.
What about you, Julian? What are your thoughts?
There needs to be respect, because it's useless we say we're going to allow people to put slots in their calendar to do deep work, but then because I need you, I come and disrupt that deep work, So there needs to be mutual respect. We need to make sure we are working towards the same objectives. That's also quite important. But ultimately, I still think it's about being intentional on understanding where value comes from. If we fail to understand that, because the relationship is going to be very difficult, and there are going to be a lot of clashes or conflict in that regard, makes people feel uncomfortable at work. And let's not forget that people do their best work when they feel relaxed, they feel they're in a safe space, not comfortable where that entitlement kind of comfort, right? But they know that people have their back. That's different. Because people don't want to feel that they are working in a certain manner or they have to produce because they fear being reprimanded or potentially losing their job. That's not a good space to be in for any employee. You want to feel that you are working in an environment whereby you can say no, you can disagree, but ultimately you commit to what the objective is. And that means that you've got a culture, an environment that ultimately is collaborative and that has each other's back. That's quite important. But it's I think it needs to be nurtured in a way that makes sense to the people involved. There's no hard and fast solution to this type of thing.
I think perhaps the easiest, perhaps the go-to strategy with that would be to ask the right questions in the correct tone and in the correct environment so that we can get the information that we need, that we can use as building blocks to...
But yes, but if I don't feel safe, I'm not going to give you the right answers.
Correct.
I'm going to give you a manufactured answer, which is going to make you walk away with potentially the answers that you want, but it means absolutely nothing. So in coaching and we talk about psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
The ability to integrate, the ability to ask questions, the ability to provide input and challenge. Most organizations stop at one, at the integration. The ability to ask questions. Everybody's so busy, why am I going to go and ask questions? Daniel's permanently in his office, Daniel's on a phone, I'm going to go ask questions, I'm going to make him think I'm stupid.
And that brings us to the concept that you put forth, is that output and outcome. And the output, to me, at least my understanding based on what you said, is that the output is just you're doing things just for the sake of doing. The outcome, you're having a greater impact. So that would be my understanding. And if you're doing things for the sake of doing, and you're sort of like regurgitating an answer just to use your word, manufacture an answer that it would appease me, we both have not obtained anything.
Exactly. It's fair.
And there's a whole science behind the value of selfishness. And again, I'm talking about selfishness, not necessarily being egotistic, as a form of setting boundary. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Cruel to be kind in the sense that I am going to be selfish and say no to you, boss person, because I need to get this done. Now, if you respect me enough, you'll accept it. If you don't respect me enough, you'll take the action that you need and we'll act accordingly. So the being selfish to a certain extent is a form of setting or a way of setting boundaries. But that being selfish needs to be tied to what you said, the impact. I am going to be selfish and go to the gym because me feeling better with myself is going to give me energy, which means I can give more to my family. That level of selfishness is positive.
Yeah.
The level of selfishness when I say, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to leave my partner, take care of our dogs and my child, our child, and the house and everything else, and not give a rat's ass. That's being egotistic. It's not the same thing we're talking about.
Sometimes you just need to do things for ourselves, because we're also a human being that giving us that self-love. I mean, there is always a spectrum of this, and this is like too much of a good thing can also harm us. Drinking too much water in excess can also damage our kidneys, right? So too much of a good thing can also harm us. I mean, going from one extreme to an end in any circumstances, in most cases, I would say it's not beneficial. So finding that at equilibrium that works for us in that particular situation, and that's why I mentioned the word spectrum, because we understand that it's a range, and that range differs from situation to situation and from one instance to the other as well. So I think we need to be mindful, and I think selfishness is being selfish in the context that you presented it. I think is the right word, because that's the only way how we can understand it and implement it. Otherwise, it won't click, I feel, but not because we are egotistic about our approach or we want things our way.
We're not narcissists here.
Yes.
Okay, we're trying to contribute to something which has positive impact. And sometimes the only way a person is going to understand it is by telling them, look, from your perspective, would you appreciate this? Or if people find it difficult to understand why you need to focus, what do you need in order to complete a task? I would need a closed room, I put my headphones on, and all this soundproofing. I said, so just because I don't have soundproofing doesn't mean I'm not doing deep work. You get that? Okay. I didn't necessarily see it that way.
I think we made a bit of a full circle in our conversation, and just a bit of a conclusion remarks. Julian sometimes mentioned the word gifts. There is always a gift in a situation, and I really appreciate that. You mentioned it a couple of times during our Vistage sessions. And if you were to give a parting gift to our listeners and viewers, a message, what would that be?
That's a brilliant question. So thank you for that. My gift to others would be, don't be too hard on yourself. A little bit of selfishness can do a lot of good. And don't be afraid of admitting that sometimes you need help. Everybody needs help. The best leaders in the world, the biggest businessmen and women in the world have an army of helpers around them. They've got advisors, they've got mentors, they've got psychologists, they've got mental coaches, they've got trainers. They do not get where they get on their own. So it's okay for you to reach out. Reach out to Vistage is even better, but there are many communities that can help. But they don't have to be communities. Look at your own social network. We go to different people for different things. We know we have certain friends that we speak to for certain things and certain friends for others because they have different qualities, different skill sets. So it's okay as part of your self-reflection is that. So the biggest gift to yourself is be self-reflective. And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I need some help.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Daniel.
From my point of view, I think if we ever get to a situation where we think that we cannot get out of, like for example, we were speaking about burnout or being in a situation that in our minds it's impossible, it's important to find people to speak to, be it our family, be it our partners, if possible, be it our network of friends, even to speak with our peers, because most probably we endure these situations because we end up holding everything to ourselves. And I think that is very important to actually be able to get anything in our chest, and we just speak up about it with our network of people. As well, doing this self-reflection exercises will also help us to grow even further, because stopping and think about our tasks or engagements or whatever, even in personal life, I think if we stop for a little breather and think and reflect and see ways how to grow, learn from mistakes. I think that will help us even grow ourselves even better. Thank you, Nan, for inviting us. Yeah.
Julian, Brendan, thank you for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation. It gave me a very new or different, let's say, perspective. And yeah, I noticed myself behaving in a slightly different way than the usual one-to-ones that I have. So I'm really excited to have more of these kind of conversations. So thank you for accepting this invite, and for Brendan, especially you, for venturing out into being courageous enough to do so. So thank you.
Maybe more.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.